Internal Revenue Service IRS tax news. Treasury, IRS and Labor announced plan to implement coronavirus-related paid leave for workers and tax credits for small and mid-sized businesses to swiftly recover the cost of providing coronavirus-related leave. IR 2020-57, March 20th, 2020. Washington. Today, the U.S. Treasury Department, Internal Revenue Service IRS, and the U.S. Department of Labor announced that small and mid-sized employers can begin taking advantage of two new refundable payroll tax credits designed to immediately and fully reimburse them dollar for dollar for the cost of providing coronavirus-related leave to their employees. This relief to employees and small mid-sized businesses is provided under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, signed by President Trump on March 18, 2020. The act will help the United States combat and defeat coronavirus by giving all Americans businesses with fewer than 500 employees to provide employees with paid leave, either for the employee's own health needs or to care for family members. The legislation will enable employers to keep their workers on their payrolls, while at the same time ensuring that workers are not forced to choose between their paychecks and the public health measures needed to combat the virus. Key takeaways: paid sick leave for workers. For COVID-19 related reasons, employees receive up to 80 hours of paid sick leave and expanded paid child care leave when employees' children's schools are closed or child care providers are unavailable. Complete coverage. Employers receive 100% reimbursement for paid leave pursuant to the Act. Health insurance costs are also included in the credit. Employers face no payroll tax liability. Self-employed individuals receive an equivalent credit. Fast funds. Reimbursement will be quick and easy to obtain. An immediate dollar-for-dollar offset against payroll taxes will be provided. Where a refund is owed, the IRS will send the refund as quickly as possible. Small business protection. Employers with fewer than 50 employees are eligible for an exemption from the requirements to provide leave to care for a child whose school is closed or childcare is unavailable in cases where the viability of the business is threatened. Easing compliance. Requirements subject to 30-day non-enforcement period for good faith compliance efforts. To take immediate advantage of the paid leave credits, businesses can retain and access funds that they would otherwise pay to the IRS in payroll taxes. So this is one way they're going to fund some of these credits, meaning you typically have the payroll taxes that you would be taking from the employees out of their check and your own payroll taxes that you would typically then be depositing to the IRS. Instead of doing so, you may be able to keep those funds in some way to have them sooner rather than processing the payroll taxes and then getting the refund or the credit at a later time. Back to the text. If those amounts are not sufficient to cover the cost of paid leave, employers will seek an expedited advance from the IRS by submitting a streamlined claim form that will be released next week. So in other words, if your deposits aren't enough to cover the payroll taxes, then typically you can apply for basically another payment over and above the amount of the deposit to get the money sooner before actually filing the payroll taxes and putting the credit on them at the end of the time period, the end of the quarter. Background. The Act provided paid sick leave and expanded family and medical leave for COVID-19 related reasons and created the refundable paid sick leave credit and the paid child leave credit for eligible employers. Eligible employers are businesses and tax-exempt organizations with fewer than 500 employees that are required to provide emergency paid sick leave and emergency paid family and medical leave under the Act. Eligible employers will be able to claim these credits based on qualifying leave they provide between the effective date and December 31st, 2020. Equivalent credits are available for self-employed individuals based on similar circumstances. Paid leave. The Act provides that employees of eligible employers can receive 2 weeks up to 80 hours of paid sick leave at 100% of the employee's pay where the employee is unable to work because the employee is quarantined and or experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and seeking medical diagnosis. An employee who was unable to work because of need to care for an individual subject to quarantine, to care for a child whose school is closed or child care provider is unavailable for reasons of COVID-19 and or the employee is experiencing substantially similar conditions as specified by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, can receive 2 weeks up to 80 hours of paid sick leave at 2/3 the employee's pay. An employee who is unable to work due to a need to care for a child whose school is closed or child care provider is unavailable for reasons related to COVID-19 may in some instances receive up to an additional 10 weeks of expanded paid family and medical leave at 2/3 the employee pay. Paid sick leave credits for an employee who is unable to work because of coronavirus quarantine or self-quarantine or has coronavirus symptoms and is seeking medical diagnosis. Eligible employers may receive a refundable sick leave credit for sick leave at the employee's regular rate of pay up to $511 per day and $5,110 in the aggregate for a total of 10 days. For an employee who is caring for someone with coronavirus or is caring for a child because the child's school or child care facility is closed or the child care provider is unavailable due to coronavirus, eligible employers may claim a credit for 2/3 of the employee's regular rate of pay up to $200 per day and $2,000 in the aggregate for up to 10 days. Eligible employers are entitled to an additional tax credit determined based on the costs to maintain health insurance coverage for the eligible employee during the leave period. Child care leave credit. In addition to the sick leave credit for an employee who is unable to work because of the need to care for a child whose school or child care facility is closed or whose child care provider is unavailable due to the coronavirus, eligible employers may receive a refundable child care leave credit. This credit is equal to 2/3 of the employee's regular pay, capped at $200 per day or $10,000 in the aggregate. Up to 10 weeks of qualifying leave can be counted towards the child care leave credit. Eligible employers are entitled to an additional tax credit determined based on costs to maintain health insurance coverage for the eligible employee during the leave period. Prompt payment for the cost of providing leave. When employers pay their employees, they are required to withhold from their employees' paycheck federal income taxes and the employee's share of Social Security and Medicare. The employers then are required to deposit these federal taxes along with their share of Social Security and Medicare taxes with the IRS and file quarterly payroll taxes, 941s, Form 941 series, with the IRS. So in other words, the general scenario for payroll taxes is you have the employees, you're going to have to say, here's your wages, we're going to take from you out of your wages in theory, even though they never actually get the money, but in theory, you earned this much and we took from you your Social Security, your Medicare, your federal income taxes. We took them right out of your paycheck before you even got it. And we have to match Social Security and Medicare on the employer side of things. Then we typically take that money that we took out of the paycheck and our portion as the employer, we pay that to the IRS. And then at the end of the quarter, at the end of every 3 months, we have to file a Form 941, which is really just an informational return. We typically, if everything's done right, don't usually have to pay more money at that time. It's just saying, hey, look, this is what we owed, this is what we took from the employees, and this is what we owe in terms of the payroll taxes, and this is what we have paid. That's going to be the general process that you would kind of think in general for the payroll taxes. Back to the text. Under the guidance that will be released next week, eligible employers who pay qualified sick leave or child care leave will be able to retain an amount of payroll taxes equal to the amount of qualifying sick and child care leave that they paid rather than deposit them with the IRS. So now they're saying, okay, we're going to give you this, basically this credit. So you would think, okay, how does a credit work? Well, maybe I'll file the Form 941 for the payroll taxes, and it's a refundable credit, so maybe they'll then give me money back after I do so. However, we would like the money sooner. How can we get the money sooner? Well, we can predict that the credit's going to be happening, calculate the credit now, and then instead of giving them the money that we would give them from the money that we took from our employees due to their payroll taxes, Social Security, Medicare, and federal income taxes, and our share of payroll taxes, Medicare, Social Security, we'll just hold on to that. And then when we do the informational return, the 941 at the end of the quarter, we should just be able to report the fact that we now are netting out the fact that we didn't deposit as much because we took the credit out already, and therefore the 941 should still be an informational return, and hopefully we don't owe any money at that point in time, and we were able to keep the money and in essence get the credit sooner in that way. Back to the text. The payroll taxes that are available for retention include withheld federal income taxes, the employee share of Social Security and Medicare taxes, and the employer's share of Social Security and Medicare taxes with respect to all employees. Those are the typical kind of payroll taxes for federal payroll taxes, right? That means we took from the employee their federal income tax that we calculated based on their W-4 information. We took from them the Social Security that they owe, the Social Security and Medicare that they owe, and we're forced to make them pay by taking it out of their check. And then we have to pay on top of that as the employer, Social Security and Medicare, kind of like in a matching type of function. And so those are the typical payroll taxes that we would be considering as we look at this process. Back to the text. If there are not sufficient payroll taxes to cover the cost of qualified sick and child care leave paid, employers will be able to file a request for an accelerated payment from the IRS. So you might say, well, what would happen if the amount of my credit is bigger than the amount that I would typically pay to the IRS with Social Security, Medicare, federal income tax? Well, then you can apply for an accelerated payment in that case and not have to wait till you actually file the Form 941 at the end of the quarter, hopefully getting the money sooner once again. Back to the text. The IRS expects to process these requests in 2 weeks or less. The details of this new expedited procedure will be announced next week, so look for more information on that process. Example: if an eligible employer paid $5,000 in sick leave and is otherwise required to request $8,000 in payroll taxes, including taxes withheld from all its employees, the employers could use the $5,000 of the $8,000 of taxes it was going to deposit for making qualified leave payments. So, right, they're saying, hey, normally we withhold from the employees. We're paying the employees still, even though there's this qualified sick leave and we're going to be paying them the sick leave. We withheld $8,000 in total withholding, Social Security, Medicare, and federal income taxes and whatnot. And we're going to pay then the sick leave of the $5,000 with that $8,000 that we would typically be given to the IRS, because we're anticipating that we're going to have a credit, and therefore we're not going to give them the money that we would typically give them, and we're going to reflect that on the 941 at the end of the quarter. Back to the text. The employer would only be required under the law to deposit the remaining $3,000 on its next regular deposit date. If an eligible employer paid $10,000 in sick leave and was required to deposit $8,000 in taxes, so now you have a situation where the sick leave is higher than the taxes. Now I calculated this qualifying sick leave, and that's higher than the payroll taxes, Social Security, Medicare, federal income taxes that I took from the employees, and my share, Social Security, Medicare taxes. The sick leave is higher than that. Well, what do I do then? Back to the text. The employer could use the entire $8,000 of taxes in order to make qualified sick leave payments. So we're going to take the entire amount that we would have given to the IRS for payroll taxes, and we're going to pay that for the sick leave, but it's only $8,000 and we need to pay $10,000. So we're also going to file a request for the accelerated credit for the remaining $2,000. We're going to say, hey, IRS, yeah, we took all the money that we were going to give you and we didn't give it to you, but we still need like another $2,000 to pay the sick leave. And we're going to get an accelerated request, so they should actually give us the money before we file the quarterly tax returns at the end of the quarter, hopefully. Back to the text. Equivalent child care leave and sick leave credit amounts are available to self-employed individuals under similar circumstances. These credits will be claimed on their income tax return and will reduce estimated tax payments. Small Small business exemption. Small businesses with fewer than 50 employees will be eligible for an exemption from the leave requirements related to school closing or childcare unavailability, where the requirements would jeopardize the ability of the business to continue. The exemption will be available on the basis of simple and clear criteria that make it available in circumstances involving jeopardy to the viability of the employer's business as a going concern. Labor will provide emergency guidance and rulemaking to clearly articulate the standard. Non-enforcement period. Labor will be issuing a temporary non-enforcement policy that provides a period of time for employers to come into compliance with the Act. Under the policy, Labor will not bring an enforcement action against any employer for violations of the Act so long as the employer has acted reasonably and in good faith to comply with the Act. Labor will instead focus on compliance assistance during the 30-day period. For more information about these credits, other relief, visit Coronavirus Tax Relief. There's a link to that here. You can find a link to this in the description. That'll be on the IRS website, irs.gov, irs.gov. Information regarding the process to receive an advance payment for the credit will be posted next week.